we can take our seats now, please. Okay, I think we're nearly there. Let's start. Good morning, everyone. I'm Coco Carmona, and on behalf of the Coalition for Open Digital Ecosystems, I would like to welcome you all to what is the Coalition's very first event in Brussels. For those, and I will talk through this morning event later, but for those who are unfamiliar, CODE is a collaborative industry initiative dedicated to fostering open digital ecosystems. It was launched in late 2023 by a group of companies that believe that open digital ecosystems are better for businesses, society, and most importantly, consumers. It came together quite naturally and organically. All of the members share the belief that openness drives growth in the EU as we consider how to boost the competitiveness of the European economy for the next 5 years in what it's going to be, and it's a very challenging global context. We believe that digital ecosystems should be taken into consideration, and that is because they can bring growth to companies, big and small, new and old. Since CODE was launched, members have already had initial discussions with industry. Some of you I can see here today about what good looks like when it comes to digital ecosystems. What is it that fosters innovation, drives competitiveness, and most importantly, empowers consumers? There is one common element, and that is openness. While there is no single definition of openness, and it's clear because there are thousands of different services and platforms that exist today, there are some elements that are common. One is seamless connectivity and interoperability, so enhancing user experience by enabling services and devices to work together. Second is consumer choice, enabling consumers to choose freely different services and devices while maintaining their access to their data. And third is an environment of open access, enabling developers to access fairly essential digital tools, all in an environment of cross-industry collaboration throughout the entire ecosystem. CODE wants to serve as a forum for these important discussions. Its members don't have the ultimate solution to many of the answers, but they truly believe in the spirits of collaboration to come together with a set of best practices. And this is precisely why we're here today. Today's agenda is packed with insightful discussions, different expert perspectives, and our objective is to together kick off a discussion about what open digital ecosystems are and how they can serve European competitiveness. We will start with a fireside chat with Cristiano Amon, President and CEO of Qualcomm, and Brian Maguire from Euractiv. They will focus on the impact of regulation on digital ecosystems, the benefits of open digital ecosystems, and role of Qualcomm in advancing digital openness. Then we will move to a panel discussion where we will aim to envision a positive scenario of the European digital agenda. At the end of 2029, which is the end of the next political mandate. We have speakers such as Professor Carmelo Cinnamon from Copenhagen University, Marisa Jimenez from Meta, Claudio Tejera from BEUC, and last but not least, a member of the European Parliament, Ms. Ana Miguel dos Santos. I'm delighted with the set of speakers. I'm sure and confident that they will deliver food for thought, provoke discussions. I will end here. Thank you all for coming, in person and online. And now let me join me in welcoming Cristiano Amon and Brian McGuire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coco. Cristiano, you must know that all the buildings in Brussels are like this. Thank you so much for being here.
Very happy to be here. This is a beautiful building. I understand there's some interesting story here.
Yeah, Einstein used to hang out here, which is, that's the expectation of what we produce today, that we come up with something.
Very, very humbling then.
Marie Curie as well. So we're here to talk about code principally and to explain what that means. So let's kick off with our fireside chat minus the fire. What is code going to do differently? Why do we need another tech organization? And really, from Qualcomm's perspective as well, what does that mean for you?
Very good. Well, first of all, very happy to be here. It's actually great to have the very first code event in Brussels. Really great introduction as we start this. You know, I will start with the answer of something very simple. Think about the role of digital ecosystems right now. It's how we live our lives. Think about our smartphone as most inseparable device. There's no conversation right now, no conversation in any country that talks about economic security that is not about digital security as well. So why would not be very simply understood that an open system is better? Of course it's better. There should be no question. And I think that's the principle in why companies like-minded companies like Qualcomm, Google, and Meta got together to create this forum to actually have this debate, because the importance of an open ecosystem when digital is part of everything we do, it should not even be a debate. And I will build on some of the elements I think that was presented during the introduction. First of all, if you think about mobile platforms that we use to communicate, it's about connecting us with every other person, connecting us with our digital life, connecting us with our data. So yes, interoperability should be something easily understood, the importance of interoperability, the importance of the platform be fair access for developers. And this is particularly important as those platforms evolve and become more relevant for everything, not only phones, what's going to happen with all the other new devices for cars and everything. And Gen AI is also going to take that to the next level, and I'll love to talk about how Gen AI is going to be changing the platform. So for me, it's an obvious thing, and I'll finish by saying the history shows if the platforms are open, technology gets democratized, everyone participate, every company can innovate. If the platforms are closed, you're depending on innovation coming from a single company, and I think that's not the direction, especially a company like Qualcomm, as we've been developing fundamental technologies to enable some of those things to happen, especially the mobile revolution. That's not how we envision. That's why code is so important for us, and I think so important at a particular moment of our society.
Thank you. If we take the converse position, why is a closed system bad, in essence? Do you see it as anti-competitive? Do you see it as problematic, not just in terms of innovation, but you talk about one supplier, maybe you have only 3 large suppliers, innovators in that market, so SMEs can't get into the market. What's the big downside of not having an open system?
Look, there's so many, but I'm going to provide some practical examples, and that's the word ecosystem is the important word here. Let's think about, as using an example, the phone, because I think it's front and center, the smartphone in this conversation. There's an incredible amount of innovation that is coming to this device, and there's a number of companies that their business exists because of this device. So if the platform is closed, the first thing that happens is you prevent innovation from happening unless the decision is made by the company that controls the platform to decide it is time for that innovation to be provided to you or the market. The second thing is how to provide fair access so that smaller companies with new ideas can participate and reach the customers. And then talk about the difference between services that you provide versus services that other people will provide, and the obvious competitive environment is that do you end up incentivizing your own services versus the other services? And I think the list is very long, all the way to interoperability. So that's what I said in the beginning. It should be obvious, the benefits of open ecosystems.
Thank you. Now we're going to take some questions a little bit further on, but you can already set those up on Slido. You have a card on your seats, and you can scan that QR code, send the questions. The hashtag is there, digital ecosystems as well, and we'll put some of your questions to Cristiano during the course of the discussion as well, but don't wait to do that. Do it now, please, as well, and we'll take questions for the panel later on too. Now, your team, when they were giving me some briefing and notes on this, they said he loves future technology, he's really excited about this, Gen AI. Tell us a bit about how you see the horizon in terms of what comes next. Maybe what's there now, but what comes next?
Yes, so it's actually important to understand what is really happening with Gen AI. And I think probably many of us see Gen AI happenings right now in the cloud, for example, but it's developing in a very fast pace in both the cloud as well on devices. The way I will describe it is there's a new form of computing, and the combination of a lot of computing power and the availability of data is allowing things like Gen AI, large language models, large visual models to exist. And it has a profound impact how we're going to interact with the machines. And I'll give you a couple examples actually from incredible work that has been done, not only Qualcomm, but many of our partners such as Meta, Google. For example, I used the Meta example on the Ray-Ban glasses, that using Llama AI, what you see, the glass see, and you can ask questions about it. You can ask questions, you can ask the large language model about what are you seeing to tell you things, and etc. Think about a phone. We have been used to an app-based platform, but all of a sudden the AI running on the phone predict your own behavior and ask you what do you want to do, or how the AI can assist you. Like a simple thing as you type text into your messaging platform, whether it's a Google Messages, whether WhatsApp, that could be a prompt for the AI, and the AI is thinking, is there something for me? Yes, do you want me to help you book this, call this, or do anything like that? And I think it's a profound change in how we interact with machines. And I think the reason I find that's interesting to talk about this in this code event, because again, it highlights the importance of having the platform be open and all of the different trust agents that are going to be part of the platform for different set of applications that the AI is now going to be assisting you.
We're going to talk about Justin a little bit as well, but the idea that you'd have one system controlling all this doesn't sound like we're going anywhere towards a competitive environment as well. So we have to assume that different suppliers need to be interoperable, like you say as well. So, a laptop with AI built into it as well, for example, which we've seen released recently, and all the other systems that are working either on the edge or in the cloud as well. What do you need to make all that work? Qualcomm has a role in this, other companies. How do you bring all that together?
Yes, so one of the things we're doing, a little bit of a technology conversation. We have been really focused on developing those computing engines. We call them the NPU, the neural processing unit. People tend to speak about processors and you think about a CPU. And I think the reality is modern processors today, they have a combination of a CPU, they have a GPU for graphics, they have now an NPU for AI processing, they have image signal processing. And the NPU it's been designed so that the AI can run all the time, and you can run multiple different models on the NPU. So that's one of the things we're doing is, can we create the computational hardware that can add this computing capability to those devices, whether it's a phone, it's a PC that was recently announced with Microsoft, the new Copilot Plus, whether it's a car, as an example. And once you have the computing engine, what I find fascinating from a technology standpoint is one of the most difficult things is to actually to do this from the phone, because all of a sudden you have a CPU that is busy doing stuff, you have a GPU that is busy doing stuff, you have to add this new engine, but you still want to have an all-day battery life. Your phone needs to be small, your phone cannot be hot. So from a technical standpoint, it's really an incredible engineering work to be able to add that computing power. Once you do that, you started to see some of those capabilities come into life, and I think many of the work that is done by our partners in code and other companies, and I'll give you some examples. I'll start actually talking about the car, go back to the phone. Car. If you have a Gen AI model running on your car or in combination with the cloud, you started to see how your interaction with the car is going to be different. So one demo that we did with one of our customers, and it was a combination of multiple companies, and you can see how those platforms need to think about car as an open platform that many can participate. So we train a model on an entire service database for that car. So something happened in the dashboard. The model has been trained on data that knows in this model, looking at data all over the history of this model, other customers, that's the problem. High likelihood, that's the problem. This is what you need to do. Then the model will get access to your calendar. Talk about getting access to the platform, get access to your calendar. The model go with another company, we actually did a demo with companies like Salesforce, go to the car maker network of dealership, identify an appointment, and all of a sudden, what's going to happen is the light comes up. You say, what is this? The car is going to say, this is the problem. Here's the solution. I already look at the available appointment. I look at your calendar. There are 3 appointments which you only like the most, and then I'm actually going to make that appointment for you. It's a whole different experience enabled by Gen AI. And you'll be able to have contextual conversation with a car. What Microsoft just announced on the PC, and the PC is notorious to being an open platform that you can bring different applications, different models and everything. You can download from the browser and all of that. But they have the Copilot that is running now on the device and indexing in your machine, all of the different things that you see. So you said, I saw something in this machine. What was it? This video that you saw, this file that you saw. And the AI say, was it. What do you want to do about it? Or think about the Copilot. Now, go all the way back to the phone and think about how this is going to completely change how you experience this device, where you can naturally talk to your phone. You can text, and the AI will take an action for you, and eventually you're going to find your phone more useful. Actually, this is one of the things I like the most. Over generations, we have seen how every phone that you buy, there's more things you can do with it. But because the phone has a smaller display and you touch on the keyboard, sometimes you have certain tasks that you say, I don't want to do on the phone. I'm going to wait until I get home or get to the office. I'm going to do on my computer. Well, with AI assistants like the Copilot and other assistants, you're going to do more productivity on the phone. That's going to change also how you're going to interact with that device.
Thank you. In terms of regulation, you live in America, I live in America. We're sitting here in Brussels talking about the next big thing. Europe's last big thing was the DMA, and American companies tend not to have, tech companies in particular, tend not to have a favorable view of regulation, by reputation at least. How do you see the role of code in this, the role of Qualcomm in this, and the DMA in terms of helping move this ecosystem forward?
Actually, it's a great question. Actually, I love answering that question because that in itself, it points to code. So the DMA, it's a good thing, I think, and I think we applaud, I think, some of the European regulatory leadership in looking about the role of those platforms broadly and the importance of having those platforms to be open, to be interoperable, and all of that. So then, if you look at code in essence, the founding member are 3 American companies. It's Meta, it's Google, and Qualcomm. And if anything, I could not think of anything better to point to show how those companies actually believe what the Europeans doing is a good thing. It's a good thing for the ecosystem, it's a good thing for competition, it's a good thing for innovation. And code, beyond many things, it's a statement of support.
When we talk about ecosystem, it could mean many things. And Europe's economy is built on the backbone of SMEs. And research often starts with the SME and then scales up. Is this, as you see it, a way to support that innovation ecosystem as well? I spoke with former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta a couple of weeks ago about his new proposal for completing the single market. He focuses on innovation research as like a fifth freedom for Europe as well. He says it's so critical, and he points to the role of not allowing big companies to swamp the market. We need to ensure that SMEs have the capacity to innovate and to scale up as well, and to get the investment to do that. Do you see your role here as a supporting role for that ecosystem of innovation, or is there a different way that you see it?
No, 100%. I go back to what I said. You cannot talk about the economy separated from digital, because I think the economy is digital in so many ways. And that has materializes through those platforms. So if the platform is not open, if you have an SME that does not have a scale of a large company, and they have a great idea, or they have something which actually is relevant for a particular market in Europe, or particular set of customers that they have access to, if the platform is not open and allow that company to have access to their customers through digital, then that company won't be able to innovate, won't be able to grow. So I think it is a great example. That's why we like this vision, I think, that was actually established on the DMA about the number of customers that are needed to be accessed through the platform and no other way for those customers to get access. That in itself shows the importance of those platforms to be open to the SME.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about trust as well, because competition is one thing where there's the risk of dominance by key players and freezing others out. But there's also, when you're dealing with edge computing and cloud and one company having access to all that, excluding others, locking them out of that ecosystem. Do you see the consumers are going to have a voice in this as well in terms of choosing the technologies, or demanding from politicians that the market, the ecosystem is open?
I think the way consumers behave, and it's probably universal, consumers want choice, consumers want and benefit from competition, and consumers want to have access to the innovation. And the question is first of all, how can the consumers know there's something new? So access becomes very important. And then it goes to, from that, how can they choose that option? And how they can trust that option, especially with their data. And I think those things are all interconnected, and that speaks to some of the objectives of the discussions enabled by code.
Okay. Interoperability, how do you see bottlenecks emerging here, and how can code help unblock that pathway as well to make sure that there's a highway which flows well?
Look, I'm very passionate about the topic of interoperability, and it probably has a little bit to do with the history of our company. I think our company have been in the forefront or the very beginning of what is the mobile revolution. Some of the things we have done, the fundamentals of 3G, 4G, 5G technology, and personally I have been in each one of those transitions. So it's surprising to me why interoperability is not done by design. Because think about it. Just think about it going back to the early days of mobile phones, which the principle of mobile phone is everybody has its own phone, and you can only call certain people. You only call the people in your operator. That doesn't work. You need to call everybody. Think about the issue of roaming, which was actually Europe had a leadership position allowing roaming. So it's kind of an essential part of the telecommunication networks to be interconnected, standard-based in interoperability. And I think that should be true for everything. If instead of calling, today we text, or we do a video call, or we do a group chat, that is fundamentally basic communications. Why would interoperability not be designed from the get-go? That is the principle. So I think we're very passionate about this, and I think that speaks to the importance of interoperability, that actually that's what enabled the telecommunication industry to be what it is today.
But there is a competition element in that as well, is there not? Where if you don't have that interoperability, you have closed systems because there's competitive advantage, particularly over a period of time. How does the regulation as it stands deal with that, or do we need to have something which is going to enable Gen AI generation to have this interoperability?
Look, one of the things I like about a DMA is actually establish the principle of interoperability of systems, and that should be a principle that should survive technology evolution. And you can see in the example I provided how communication had evolved from a simple voice call to, I think, through the past few years, we all do video calls now. The importance of interoperability of that, but then with Gen AI, what else is coming? Those principles needs to be upheld, and I think the regulatory framework is in place. It's important for companies to be, implementing their solutions with that. But most important is the competition. Ability of different platforms to compete for services, and if you choose them, you should be able to reach everybody with that.
The regulations there, the system seems fairly clear at this point, but the enforcement capability, do you have concerns that the enforcement capability will lack and that this openness will not come as quick as it should?
Look, I think the way I look at the phase we are right now is really about implementation and enforcement. And part of what we're trying to do with code is to bring awareness of the importance of this and hopefully get companies to be motivated to do the right thing.
Let's talk about doing the right thing. We have some questions here as well. Please send more questions in for us. And if you can just tell us who you are and where you're from as well, that's helpful, just for some context. We have one from Claire Marie Healy. So how does Qualcomm and the code founders ensure that their involvement in open digital ecosystems positively impacts our planet and addresses, that's just disappeared somewhere, and addresses the digital agenda?
Yes. I think the first question is, it's actually incredible what some of the industry, especially the mobile industry, have done. Just think about the number of devices you would carry if you didn't have your smartphone. You probably have your own camera, your portable video player, your music player. Probably you're going to have 10 or 15 devices, and all you need to do is to carry a smartphone. It's incredible how much more efficient technology has become, and especially the availability and access on data. It's the most cloud-connected device. And the more that you run computation in those devices, especially like Gen AI versus only running on the cloud, I think the energy efficiency is truly incredible. Now, the second part of the question is, if I understand, what are we doing on the evolution of digital ecosystems, maintaining them open? I think that's the essence of the reason we thought it was a good idea to create this coalition, because the amount of innovation that we have right now is truly incredible, and it's only accelerating, especially because Gen AI. And it is going to be the wrong thing to do if the pace of innovation is actually determined by the speed of a closed-end ecosystem deciding when it's time to innovate.
Thank you. Question from Matt Allison. What are the competitive dynamics in the mobile device ecosystem? Are the dominant OS providers doing enough to support openness, and how can policy help?
Look, I'll find a good way to answer the question. If you look of Google, which is a partner in code, Android is a horizontal open platform. You have multiple hardware providers building devices. You have multiple services coming to the device. It supports standards. So I think that's a good model, and it's important to remain open and remain horizontal as we think about innovation coming, especially the Gen AI innovation cycle.
Thank you. Let me add just a little bit onto that as well. In terms of political culture and policy development, do you see any clear difference between how the United States is approaching this and how Europe is approaching this?
I'll say that the DMA, it was a pioneering move from the European regulators. The understanding of the role of digital broadly into the economy, and I think there are elements of this, that especially the elements of open platforms, interoperability of platforms, that are, I would say, are being exported by different places. There's increased interest within the United States about the interoperability and open platforms, and you can see in other geographies as well. It's just, as I'm probably go back to what I said in the beginning. It's obvious. Why wouldn't an open ecosystem be better?
Thank you. A question from Umberto Gambini. Is Umberto in the room? Is he online? There you are. Good to see you, sir. Do you know this guy?
How are you?
You'll meet him afterwards. Don't you worry, he'll introduce himself. So with the DMA, where this is one of the remedies to change gatekeepers' discriminatory and illegal behaviors are fines. However, until now, antitrust fines haven't restored fair competition everywhere. Are structural remedies necessary to open up ecosystems? So,
look, I'm not an expert to answer this question, but I think if the principles are correct, and then you have a path to implementation, you have a technical solution, companies should implement it and follow that principle. And I think it's the regulator's job to enforce it.
Okay. I don't want to drag into politics, so I just want to talk a little bit about the political culture a bit. We have to deal with different administrations at different times, and do you find the overall political environment conducive to open ecosystems, or do you see players in the market who will take advantage of political uncertainty at the moment? Or is the direction of travel really set by regulation like the DMA so far, and we'll stay on path?
Look, I will answer that. I would assume the way I look at the role of digital platforms broadly over a long period of time into the society, the role of the economy, I think those type of regulations, they do and should survive multiple administrations, and they're kind of probably independent of different political preferences, because it affects everyone. You can't not think about not having those digital platforms as part of the economy. Just think what happened, for example, in many different countries, if all of a sudden you cannot communicate via text, if some of those services are no longer available, I think people will not be able to conduct their business. They will not be able to. So I think this is actually a bigger issue than political preferences.
That echoes what I hear in DC as well, from Commissioner Vestager, to like they think that these systems are more robust than political change, and that they're driven largely by the needs of commerce, and therefore are likely to be more robust over the medium to long term as well. Let's go back to talk about technology a little bit as well. You've laid out different types of technology, how they're going to work together as well. What do we not see that's coming? What's the next thing that you're excited is a real potential game changer?
There are many. I want to go back to the conversation we had about Gen AI. Gen AI is a fundamental change in how we're going to interact with computers and how we're going to interact with different computing spaces. And you can see that. I think you saw with the Copilot Plus as an example that's the next Windows. I think the Copilot Plus announcement from Microsoft yesterday is as significant, in my opinion, and I think I saw some things in the press about this, as the Windows 95, for example, transition. And I think that's you see that also happening in phones with what Google's doing with Gemini. You see Llama, for example, the Llama 3, and I think there's a number of different use cases. Many of it, we have no idea what they are, that is going to be enabled by Gen AI. I like to say, if you have asked me this question 6 months ago, I'll probably give you tens of use cases. 6 months from past, we now have hundreds. I'm sure 6 months from now will be thousands. So that's very exciting. The other thing that I'm very excited about is spatial computing. I think the ability to merge the virtual world and the real world, since everything has a digital twin of everything, it's incredibly powerful, and that's going to be the next computing platform. And I think the last part of my answer, and it's a little bit one of the things we've been very excited about it, is the incredible technology transformation happening in the automotive industry. Car companies are becoming tech companies, and the car is now a new computing space as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for technology evolution.
And just to follow on from that as well, we see the car companies become tech companies, financial companies as well in some regards. Are we seeing a reorganization of the industrial world on the basis of this too, or is that going too far?
No, I think that's a good way to think about it, because I will say there is so much transition happening because of technology. You see, for example, dramatic productivity increases created by Gen AI. You see manufacturing changing with smart manufacturing, the ability to put edge processing and AI and connectivity. You see the digital transformation of cities with smart cities. So I think technology and innovation cycle will probably have an even bigger role going forward. And with that, you're going to see new companies emerging as leaders, and important to make sure that those companies exist in every geography, including the ability of companies in Europe that have been successful today to be able to continue to be successful as they move to digital.
And you talk about smart cities. The smart city needs minimum 5G essentially for most purposes, and the capability of this interoperability between different types of signaling, even the pedestrian, for example, as well. Are we not going to stay with 5G, or do we need to wait for 6G to see the smart cities really function effectively, and self-driving, autonomous vehicles, all those things working properly?
That's a great topic of conversation. I think, especially in Europe, I think we probably can talk about this for days. But I'll kind of start from a very basic premise. Connectivity is critical infrastructure. We should be thinking of connectivity the same way we're thinking about water, about electricity, about gas, because it's critical infrastructure. And the most important thing is actually to build a robust network, to build coverage for 5G. And the reason that's very important is because as we think about moving to 6G, a lot of the technologies that are being deployed on 5G right now, that is actually the foundation for 6G. They can be utilized. The main difference of 6G, and we're going to see, there's progress on the standards. We're going to see prototyping soon. It is scheduled to be launched as early as 2030 at the end of the decade. But the main thing of 6G is the addition of AI to 5G network and the ability to have a network now that senses in addition of connecting. And countries that have not built that robust infrastructure, I believe there's a correlation of not having that infrastructure and not being able to fully exercise the potential of the digital economy and the ability to actually remain competitive when you evolve from that to 6G with AI. So that's a broader conversation, but I think the importance to have a healthy operator and carrier system, because everyone is looking at the carriers alone to take the burden of the entire investment. And I think the regulatory framework needs to be such to support that. I worry sometimes about the long-term impact of not having that critical infrastructure in place. And I think there's a lot that needs to be done still to build that infrastructure in Europe.
This is one of the things I spoke with Enrico Leto about, and it was the idea that you have 27 telecoms markets in Europe. If you're going to invest in that, particularly for small companies, it's nightmarish. And he was arguing for the consolidation of the telecoms market to make sure that exactly what you describe is possible soon. Are you optimistic that that can be done? And just to layer in also standardization, is part of the problem this isn't done, standardization in Europe?
I don't think the issue is standardization, but this is a very complex issue, so I won't adventure myself to provide a solution. Because you have to find an optimal balance between the member states having their digital sovereignty and having their own carriers in the market and competition, but at the same time provide the carrier enough scale that they can invest. It's a complex problem. I don't know what the solution is, but I'll say if you abstract the issue, it needs to be solved. There are multiple ways to solving. There's, you could have public-private partnerships. You can have other companies investing in infrastructure. You can have sharing of infrastructure. You can have enablement of consolidation. You can have different business models. There are a number of different tools. I would just say, as a general comment, there are broader consequences of not having that critical infrastructure in place.
Do you want to elaborate on what they are?
Well, I think it's if we're building a connected digital economy with every company is going to have smart assets, connected assets. If everything is connected, a car is connected, in addition to your phone, and you need to have the capability to do Gen AI. I like to, it's interesting, I'm going to not try to get too technical, but I like to show that we've been full circle. When GSM started, and that was a long time ago, that was 2G, Europe was very proud of having one of the best networks in the world, and the voice quality that you have. And then we went to data, and we started to see in the 3G transition, the 4G transition, coverage was not as good as GSM. But there's one thing that happened that gave a little bit of forgiveness. We start sending messages to each other. And we send message. Sometimes you send a message, you don't get a response right away. You wait until you get a better signal. It's okay, you got a response. But if you have a voice call, that's a problem, because voice is very unforgiving. Latency is a problem, delay is a problem, noise is a problem. Well, we went for circle. If you're talking to an AI, and the AI is in the cloud, the importance of latency of the mission critical of that connectivity is different. If you have you have an autonomous vehicle, whether it's a car or a different type of vehicle, and you needed to rely on the connectivity, and that's been mission critical, that's a different story. So my point is, as we think of the evolution of Gen AI and the evolution of industrial internet, industrial AI, and all of those different systems, not having that infrastructure means that that's not going to happen, that companies are not going to be competitive, or they are not going to be able to develop the next cycle of innovation. That's the consequence.
And that's a great way to finish. That tied everything together neatly. Thank you so much, Cristiano.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you.
We have a 20-minute break. It will be 20 minutes, and then we come back for the panel discussion as well. And again, if you have questions for the panel, send them to us anytime you like, and we'll put them to. Thank you again to Cristiano.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
kick off with 60 seconds, just an elevator pitch of what your key message is today, and then we'll get into the conversation. Just to remind our audience, use the QR code for questions, and you can send those to us now. If you're online or in the room, you can send those questions. We'll bring the questions to the panel in a short time as well. We'll not wait till the very end, so please go ahead with that. So, Carmelo, let's kick off with you. 60 seconds on your key message for a more competitive Europe starts with open digital ecosystems.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm drawing basically on a study that we did with my colleague Fansu from started the wrong way, from HBS, about the impact of digital open ecosystems. So first of all, clarifying the concept, we like to speak more about openness rather than open as a binary, because there are different degrees of openness, what you open, what you're not, and also because the concept of openness reminds more of what this is really about, which is more about both a process and the structure. So a process that enable complementarities both in production and in consumption of interconnected goods. Now, what is that? And then the structure is more about the structural relationship that contains these complementarities. And when you enable this for this openness, this complementarities, what do they bring in terms of impact on competitiveness? The first and foremost benefits are reduced development cost for those building upon what are some of those shared assets, the digital assets that have been used for different kind of productions as they see fit with their own value proposition to their own customers. So it's not just working for somebody, but it's actually building on somebody else to work for themselves. And this has to do also with the concept of increased autonomy that, it's particularly dear to innovators and developers in open source community, for instance. So there's much more effort. We have seen that it's actually profuse. Greater variety of choice when it comes to users and how you basically combine these differences. And last but not least, there are lots of spillovers to the global economy in general that cannot be actually anticipated when you design this open ecosystem.
Carmelo, thank you. Marisa, 60 seconds.
Thank you. So the first thing that I would want to do is to thank everyone at CODE, at our coalition, the Coalition of Open Digital Ecosystems. It's our launch, so there's been a lot of effort in this room from many of you. So it's really an exciting day, and it's an exciting day because this coalition is anchored on openness, and we are in Brussels as well, which means that what we do is to support, and this is what we want to do in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years or more, is to support policies that really promote that concept of openness in the broader term that you just talked about. Because we think that openness is important for Europe, and it's good for Europe, it's good for its citizens, it's good for large businesses, but for small businesses as well. And those small businesses really, why is that? It's because they can scale a lot faster. And that's really what it is about. We are committed at Meta on openness through, for example, open source AI for many years now. The latest example is Llama 2 and Llama 3. We can talk a bit more about that. And obviously, when it comes to openness and open source and interoperability, our partners are very important also when it comes to products or so. We can talk a little bit more about what the openness means in the next, and what has happened in the legislative debate. But definitely, when it comes to openness, openness is linked to innovation, it links to investment, to research, to training, and how those elements really factor in when we look at the competitive landscapes of Europe moving forward. Thanks.
Marisa, thank you. Anna, 60 seconds.
It's open. It's open. So thank you all for being here and for the invitation. It's always a pleasure. So as Carmen said, we are in Europe. So in Europe, openness and openness code and open codes and open access, it helps us to rise or to raise fear and to bring trust to this technology, because what is illegal offline cannot be illegal online. So I need to speak about ethical standards, and the internet is not a lawless space, so we need to have rule of law, and open source means also this pattern of the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Claro.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. On behalf of BILC, European Consumer Organizations, always a pleasure to be able to share our perspective. Also, thank you for the disproportionately representative Portuguese-speaking panel. That's a very pleasant one, so kudos for that. And about the 60 seconds, of which 15 are gone now, let me just say that from a consumer perspective, it's absolutely fundamental, the idea of openness. It's absolutely key to achieve what we believe is the first and foremost necessity of any market that serves consumers, which is a pro-competitive and consumer-centric environment. And this is why, at a time where competition seems almost to be under attack in Europe, or somehow it's being pursued more stringently abroad than ever, it is very important to reach out and communicate this message that indeed what we need is an open market that can actually deliver fair and open competition, because if the market does indeed not work for everyone, then it doesn't work for anybody. So from a consumer perspective, that is by far what we would like to highlight. Thank you so much.
Claudio, thank you. So we're focusing on the digital ecosystem in the context of competitiveness. We're going to talk a lot of different subjects, but that's the general direction. Carmelo, if we talk about openness in an ecosystem, it's a bit like talking about free speech. It's that everybody wants free speech, but if you have no limits and there's an absolute free speech, that can be problematic in itself. Is it the same with an open ecosystem? Is this a free-for-all where we just can't hold back, or how is this going to work?
So no, absolutely. That's another bit of the research where we try to, clarify a little bit, the conceptualization and the concept here. So sometimes I think that, open ecosystem gets confused with, wild jungle where everybody has, full freedom. That's not the case. That's a key distinction between ecosystem and markets. In ecosystems, you have some vetted interest into the broader system of product value. So it's not that you just go get what you need and you do whatever you want. So there needs to be some tailoring of the activities and products, right, to what is the purpose of the system to start with. That's different from the market where you just go and you act individually, independently from everybody else. In ecosystems, you are not independent, you are interdependent, which is something completely different. So who takes care of these interdependencies? Because that's the other problem in making an ecosystem thrive versus making, an ecosystem failing. There are lots of externalities that needs to be taken care. That's why you have lots of, standards, interfaces, rules. So you have both technological architectures and interorganizational architecture and arrangements, to make sure that the system works as it's supposed. So basically that where, you try to maximize what are the positive externalities, but you minimize what are, potential frictions that leads to failure. Some of this, for instance, fragmentation, right? If you go, you tag everything and you move to some, other directions, then, the system gets more and more fragmented, and you won't achieve, the kind of interoperability, for instance, that is needed to make, that consumption choices, frictionless, for instance. So some of the centralized governance is needed actually to make sure that ecosystems are run properly.
Just to tie off on that, do you think that we have that governance in place now, or is this something we need to look at during the next legislature?
This gets a little bit political, but so in terms of, you were mentioned before, the DMA, which is achieving, a lot in this space. But as I already put it, even in the parliament at the beginning, during the discussion, my concern is that we go back to that binary vision on one-off, right? Open, close. This is not the case. So in academic, scientific, studies, we have lots of those contingencies where we say, hey, in this, you need more of restrictions. In this, you need to open up. So when it is good, when it is bad, some of those contingencies, I believe, needs to be brought back into the discussion. So you cannot just have, you need to share all the data. Why? Okay. When? And which kind of data, and how do you share that? So that's, I think, where the next level, what I call the DMA 2.0 should be. But as a starting point, yes, I mean, this offers a good platform.
Somebody at the Commission just cried at the idea of having to write a DMA 2.0 at this stage before the summer. To Claudio, you mentioned about consumer preferences and the idea that the openness is good as well. In the context of what Carmelo's just said, how far should we be open in terms of ensuring that ecosystem flows?
How much time do we have? Because yeah, very open-ended question for an open-ended subject. From a consumer perspective, I can tell you by far that I completely agree with what Carmelo said. Indeed, DMA has been a good starting point. This is definitely some, let's say, a market failure that consumers have identified for a while, which is, indeed, we had a situation in which we had a substantial ecosystem where right now consumers have the majority of their exchanges going through whether they like it or not. And we're not just talking about just pure old consumption matters. We're talking about true citizenship rights. These days it is very hard for whether you like it or not to exercise some of the most fundamental citizenship rights of political participation, engaging with public authorities if we're not doing it online, if we're not doing it connected. Most importantly, if we're not using some kind of solution that somehow depends or is integrated in one of these platforms that right now run the business. So the idea that we have some kind of a clear rule book that ensures a level playing field to make sure the market remains contestable is absolutely fundamental. However, when it comes to delivering solutions for users, indeed there are some significant shortcomings that we have pointed out throughout. And one of the issues has already been mentioned, interoperability. Interoperability, for sure, it's one of the key issues that should have been front center on this discussion. And it's going to be about we'll continue championing, because indeed when we have so many of these offers on the market, but they still remain essentially a locked domain which you really cannot access, where you can only you cannot roam freely between one and the other. You have your own, let's say, the messaging app through which you kindly shared us your prompts for this panel. It's a bit complicated for a user. You have to be the one making the juggling through all these products, when it would be just way easier if you have interoperability. You can just rely on having everything in the same place. So empowering the user on this perspective is still a challenge to achieve. But as you said, it's a good starting point, and it's a place where to build first and foremost. But before we get to 2.0, let's try to get to 1.0, right? And let's try to make sure that enforcement, which will be key, delivers what is expected of consumers, at least a majority of what has been promised to consumers at the end of the day, to have a better service and better quality of service.
Thank you. Marisa.
Yeah, well, I would then pick up from the last part that the colleague from BEOC has just said, and that I think that we would agree that let's deal with the 1.0 before we go to any 2.0 or 3.0, in that we have the legislation that we have, so we need to make it work. And that would be like the first thing that I would say. However, I do think I want to come back to something that Carmelo said before, and that you prompted, in the sense that when we look at openness as a principle that fuels policies, so it's not, I would not want to put it in contradiction or in opposition to it, but something that fuels those policies, and therefore can lead to new frameworks. In that sense, I would look at the new frameworks. Those frameworks, what they require, in our view, is more the adoption of the technology in a much more agile way. And if we do that, then that also requires perhaps some thinking into governance structures as well. If we look at looking at Alexander, that knows we've discussed this sometimes, the plethora of legislation that we have now on the table, and they all have different governance methods, the governance structures, different regulators, some order there, some legislative and enforcement hygiene and regulatory hygiene would be good for everyone. I think it would be good for consumers, and it would be good for industry as well.
You talk about the agility of technology as well. Any particular examples in mind that would clarify what that means?
So for example, I think that we're looking into the AI Act, for example, so Gen AI, and now in Europe we have the AI Act. The AI Act is the beginning of something, it's not the end. So it's not a regulation that is completely fit for purpose in that tomorrow you go and implement it and that's it. There's a lot to be done. The good news there, in our view, is that there is room for co-regulation. Hopefully this will be proper co-regulation, also hopefully in connection with what consumers and users have to say about it, but it needs to go quicker. One of the things of against agility, as I'm saying, is the fact that there's different enforcements. There's not an understanding of how the DSA relates to the AI Act, how the AI Act relates to the DMA and the Data Act. That needs to be solved very quickly. We cannot be agile if there's not a single alignment in the EU, something rather we look at the single market, absolutely, always the line, but we also need a single alignment in terms of enforcement and regulatory action.
Thank you. We'll come back to that a bit later as well. Anna, a lot's been achieved during this legislature. You know, we kicked off with COVID and had every reason to think nothing much was going to happen. But there's some big pieces of legislation were accomplished during this time. I mean, we talked about the AI Act now as well being foundational for what comes next too. Where do you see the work of the last 5 years laying out the work of the next 5 years? What's on the horizon in terms of possible legislative capability that works towards ecosystems and digital competition?
So I'm a lawyer. My background is law, so I personally don't like very much this kind of working with big laws and with 500 pages, because this undermines our perception of reality and our comprehension. But the question is that for European Union, in our perspective, we are very committed with the idea of having a European Innovation Union. So if we want that, we need to work on that. First, as Carmen said before, we need to have the rules, because everything is supported by rule of law. So we need laws. Then we need to have the supervision. We need to have the will. We need to have the will to see if in reality, in the phase of the application of the law, we will have the behavior of the big tech companies agreeing or accomplishing the rules. So saying that we need to have this idea that beside the fact that we have agree and approve this law, this is not the end of everything. This is the beginning of everything, and that's why the open source allows us to see more if the competition is being it's being how can I say this in
effective,
because if big tech companies are accomplishing these rules, so you need to
okay,
applicate the laws.
Okay, so we need some time to see, to evaluate, have we done the right thing? Is it working well? Is enforcement on point with this as well?
Yes, and okay, that's why we need the willing of politics.
All right.
And this that's why open source allows us to check these things. Yes.
Okay, thank you. How do you see this? Just follow on from what Anna said about what's been accomplished. This is time for enforcement. Are we going to do enough? From where your perspective is, do we have the resources to ensure enforcement? Do we, before we go do something else?
No, that's a great question for the European Commission to answer, right?
The European Commission loves to hear from you. So.
They do. But indeed, this is a very important question, which is the idea of resources. But first, let me just pull back the tape a bit here. I do understand the argument of the gigantic laws that we have, but I think taking a more holistic approach to the whole thing, I think we also need to see the starting point where we have been. So it's not that we can just say the Commission went on a legislating spree, which they kind of did, but it's not the point that it wasn't necessary. The fact that the starting point was so low that indeed the necessity for effective regulation, and most importantly, a holistic framework was there. And as a consumer, I think, because we're all consumers in the end, we should be very, very happy that this has been, in fact, done and it has been set in motion. We're talking about DMA, DSA, the whole digital package was essential. Now, the question indeed is, what will it deliver in the end? And enforcement indeed is key, but I think we've all been a bit tired of hearing this everywhere you go. Of course, enforcement is always key, but in this particular case, the issue of resources is fundamental. And this is something we always raise a flag on, which is the issue that if we really do look at the challenges facing us, the necessity of enforcement, the dimension of the ecosystem, the dimension of the players, the level of challenges ahead of us, and the harmful practices that consumers are experiencing on the ground, we really need to revamp the way we do enforcement, and we need resources that right now, I'm sorry to say, they're simply not there yet. So a lot will have to be done, and I'm just talking about European level here. I'm not even going down to the national level where, I mean, let's say DSA. I mean, there are member states in the EU where the DSA enforcer is literally the amount of one, not one authority, one person for a whole member state to enforce DSA.
Could it be worse?
I don't think. No. Yeah, it could be part-time, right?
Can I?
You never know. You never know.
Thank you, Anna.
Sorry, Brian. Just let me add this thing to what Claudio said. I don't think it's only a question of resources. It's more a question of willing, political willing, because I know I'm a political, you know, all things business as usual, and what we need is a strong politicians with a strong willing, and in those particularly issue, we need to have the willing to apply sanctions if they are not accomplished, the rules, okay? So this is more a question of willing than a question of resources, I think.
Just a small point as well. So I think when we talk about, you know, looking at the laws that we have today and spending time implementing them, I think it's also about implementing them. It's not only about enforcing and bringing fines. When you put fines on the table, it means that the law is failing, and no one wants the laws to fail. Everyone wants the laws to be a success. So it's not only about enforcement, it's also about implementation. I have to say that, in my view, a non-well-resourced regulator is a risk for everyone. And so I would say that this is very important. And to politicians, Madame MEP, it's so important that you keep pushing that when we do laws, that those governance models are bringing regulators that are well-resourced, equipped, and understand the technology. So there, I think it is important for the future and for the success of the law, which I think is what we all want.
Thank you, Ms. Carmelo.
There's a saying in the tech startup scene in Silicon Valley that what cannot be measured cannot be fixed, and so you cannot develop better products. So part of the implementation, enforcement is of course one story here, but what I believe is that part of the implementation has to do with measuring achievements, with measuring progress, and that pushes you to think, what is the progress that you're going to measure? What is the kind of achievement that you want? So objectives that you had thought this law would have achieved, right? And how far are you and then start understanding what is then the problem if we don't achieve that, and what are the side effects of the law, because you cannot anticipate what they are, but look at GDPR. Beautiful piece of law, all great principles behind, but there are studies, different studies, showing that there are some side effects. Concentration in some markets has gone up. SMEs have now higher cost of doing business because of some of the compliance with GDPRs. Is this a problem of the GDPR law? We don't know. Precisely because we don't measure and we don't understand exactly the causal mechanism, right? Whether that has to do maybe with the fact that you're dealing with different countries, different implementations across different countries, or whether that is a problem of the law per se that is imposing this additional burden on SMEs. I think that's basically, we shouldn't wait 10 years to discover this. Why don't we do this in parallel as part of the implementation process, that we empower maybe and adopting an ecosystem model, let's basically different organizations, both from different perspectives, but even including in our research community, being involved with it and start measuring this and sharing the data and try to track progress, right, on the go, so that it can be fixed and amended maybe, right? So going to a more dynamic DMA approach, as I call it.
Okay, I think we'll follow up on that. Question here from Rajan, and he said, Claudia, maybe you want to have a go at this first. Fragmented European connectivity, interoperability represents barriers to progress, not just economically, but in terms of social inclusion and citizen empowerment. Seamless cross-border AI services, what infrastructure can achieve this? What do you think in terms of, I know that's for a technical definition of this, but when we're doing the cross-border scenarios here, we're looking at interoperability, and from the consumer perspective as well. We talked about telecoms earlier and Enrico Letta. What do you think can be deployed over this next few years that can help smooth these issues of interoperability?
Just one quick, again, pulling the tape back a bit, just to make like a defense of the honor of GDPR here. The cost of compliance with the law are there. The cost of doing business are there. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to ensure that, I think this is the bottom line here, and to ensure that business is done in a fair and free manner, in a way that protects consumers and most importantly protects their fundamental rights. And that should be the baseline here. It shouldn't be just a production cost. And when it comes to GDPR, I think this is indeed a success story, to the point that the infrastructure it has deployed, all the DPOs, all the necessary impact assessments, this is something that has created a framework that will serve not just GDPR, not just privacy, but will also serve, we've been talking about AI, for instance, talking about DSA. There is a pool of resources here that can be tapped in precisely to ensure that we have more compliance, more and better compliance going forward on other laws, specifically the AI Act, for sure. So this is something we should welcome and not just always be suspected of the cost, because there's always costs associated. The question is the return. I would say the return is far positive, especially when you see you go across borders, and even in the United States, you have a draft, the APRA law, which is basically introducing a lot of the principles of the GDPR in the federal law in the US. So the extraterritoriality here is not just going by application, but also by inspiration. The so-called Brussels effect, of course, we've all heard about that. And this is something very fundamental for us, which is to ensure that our laws aren't just applicable here, they're applicable everywhere, but they're also a source of inspiration to keeping them honest, to keep corporations honest and keep them deliver products that can serve everyone, and not putting the burden on the consumer for compliance, that is so many times the situation. When it comes to the connectivity issue, and to be very, very quick, we do welcome the report, we do welcome a lot of these considerations, but we would like to urge for caution when we are talking about some of the things that are being put on the table, especially on connectivity. I think we can all agree that we need a more integrated single market. I think we can all agree that consumers need more interoperable solutions. And I think we can all agree that services should know no borders in the EU. I definitely know that, for instance, geo-blocking should definitely not be a thing right now when we're talking about this particular single market, or paying more if you're calling from Belgium to Portugal for an intra-EU call. Simple examples like that. So maybe we should start there with consumers are facing when it comes to borders. When the debate is being brought into on connectivity, when the debate is being brought not at a user perspective, not by removing the barriers for users to roam free and to enjoy the services in Europe as a whole single market, but we're starting with the corporations, specifically very large, former monopolistic corporations, as the debate on the Commission white paper has been so far, as the Enrico Letta report has been focusing on. I think it's a very valid debate, but we're starting the house through the roof and not through the ground up. So we need to be very careful when we're talking about this particular debate. I'm happy to go a bit forward because I'm already way out of my time.
No, there's plenty to bounce off there. So I want to get Anna and then Marisa on this as well. Anna.
I just want to add a thing. Interoperability is a word that comes from military world, okay? So, specifically from NATO. What does it mean? It means it's because NATO is a result of several countries that get together, their technology, their knowledge, and they try to operate together, okay? So we are using this word and trying to bring up to the technology and innovation world, okay? So, saying that, interoperability is the key word for us to have an European Union of innovation. Otherwise, because we want to merge all the technology and all the wisdom and knowledge from each country, but at the same time we want to remain some of our sovereignty. So interoperability is the key word and the secret to allows this European Union innovation.
I spoke with the commander of the US Space Force a few months ago, and he speaks about Space Force as being, I'm going somewhere sensible with this, he speaks about Space Force being the eggs within the cake. And it seems to me that the digital side of this as well, Cristiano talked earlier about the fundamental reality of modern economy. If it's not digital, it's not happening really. Is digital the eggs within the cake for Europe's competitiveness and future economy, Marisa? And are we, as Claudio said, looking at this from the wrong end, that we're building from the roof down, when a consumer-focused approach could actually give the focal clarity for the ecosystem, for the open ecosystems? Because if we're looking at what does the consumer need, and we start from that principle, then we have a clear vision of what the ecosystem should look like as well.
Great question, difficult question. I think that, so starting from what you said at the end, when we look and coming back to codes, the coalition's mantra and the plea for openness, we do think that openness is fundamental to more competitiveness in digital. And we do think that openness, because, among other things, because it serves and gives choice to consumers and users. So this is fundamental. So there, absolutely, the consumer-centric approach is necessary, but you can do it also through openness. When it comes to, does openness mean Wild Wild West or no frameworks? Not at all. You need to also frameworks, as we just discussed, frameworks that actually fuel and support that openness concept without undermining the guardrails that are necessary and the European values in terms of fundamental rights, in terms of safety and all the rest. Now, what else is needed? I think that we need it's not only about frameworks, we need a vision. We need a vision of competitiveness. I think that we do have that in Europe. We have talent, we have in product design and engineering, so we have a lot in Europe, but we need a vision on competitiveness, and we need to do our own, look at ourselves at where we are. And we look at ourselves and what the GDP of Europe is now compared to a few years ago, how we're growing slower, and it comes to the point that we always come back to, which is investment. So when you look at I think now we're called the Seven Magnificent, which is much better than the GAFA. I like that. The Seven Magnificent companies, love it. This is Elon Musk, what it gives you. We look at the investment, 200 billion. Apparently that's half of all the investment that Europe does in public and private sector. That's something here to look at. When you look at the US investing in AI at the ratio of 20:1, I had to check that twice. I said, really? It's just very telling. So what is happening here? It's a question of it's not only about frameworks, it's about a competitiveness vision, hopefully fueled in the concept of openness that we would love to see in the next 5 years here in Europe.
Just in terms of investment as well, to invest, companies need to have clarity of legal framework. The risk dimensions have to be right as well. Just to give some examples. So do you think that Europe has a problem in terms of presenting itself as a viable opportunity to outside investors, particularly global investors?
Maybe it's a question of how, it's not whether there's a reality there of not being possible, improbable. It's probably how it is presented. And I do think that it's a combination of things. So it's not only about, so again, the investment, the reassurances, the regulatory frameworks, presenting it all together with a viable, sustainable approach. So it's not only for now, but also how do you prevent those companies from going away, just settling here and then going back to other parts of the world. And I think we need to look at that very carefully.
Thank you. Carmelo.
I'll get back to the question, whether digital is the eggs on the cake of the modern economy. Absolutely yes. For Europe in particular, to foster competitiveness for a single reason. So digital is shifting the economics of competitiveness from economies of scale being at the base of competitive advantage to economies of scope. And why is that important? Well, in the past, right, I mean, you had to, as a way to basically build competitive advantage, you need, scale in terms of resources and operations. As a company, you had to grow, right? I mean, in different countries to have been, to absorb, for instance, the impact of the investments in R&D, just to make a case, right? I mean, so you need, much broader productions and, selling much more to make that economical, right, to invest in those investments, right? That's the concept of economies of scale. So you need a lot of scale, right? So look at Nokia, right? So they needed to be never seen for different segments of the products, as a way to sustain their innovation, because then they had to spread that investments across, millions of products. There's a problem in that, right? So that then you become also, maybe into a, you get into a path, right? And obviously only a few companies can get to that level. And then the more you grow, there are also some counter effects that you become maybe less innovative, less prone to explore different opportunities and markets, precisely because you have, built that large scale. What is the shift now that digital allows you? You move to economies of scope. You don't need to grow in scale, meaning in size, but you need to grow, in terms of choices, of opportunities, of applications of your core asset. So you can invest and be super narrow and hyper specialized in doing one thing good. But then now, because of digital, you can build on others, you can connect to others to find many applications of that good thing where, you are great. My perfect, my beloved example, it's none of the big tech, whatever you might think, but it's a super hyper specialized SME on sports cars. And it's called Dallara, if you want, just Google, in the motorsport. So they work, they used to be specialized manufacturers of, components of sports cars. And they invested in a digital technology to do simulations of the configurations of those components, right, as a way to improve their own innovation. And that was, the vision of the founders. But now, because of that, they actually open up to other suppliers, and also including the OEM, right, the like of Ferrari, Maserati, whatever. And now they can exchange mathematical models rather than physical products, prototypes, to do this best configuration. as a result of that, they're now using their internal knowledge, where they were, best at, to share that knowledge, leverage that in terms, of consulting and providing this to others, to optimize their own products. And they become now central player in this, hyper-specialized supply chain.
Okay.
And they can work across the boards, right? They don't need to be now physically present in Stuttgart or other places to do this exchange of knowledge, precisely because of digital.
Marisa, do you see this as a good example of what code is here to support?
Absolutely. In the sense that, more like in policy, the world will say it's the enabling effect is fundamental. So when you look at, the power of providing an infrastructure, so in general terms, to provide an infrastructure to others in which you can build and make ventures and then, create applications and new products, and it just creates value. It just creates, it just creates value in every way. So absolutely.
Thank you. Claudio, you'll be hearing about code. You've seen the manifesto. What do you think of this as a concept? Is this, from an outsider's perspective, another tech organization, or does it deliver something unique to the conversation here?
Well, it's a great question, but not for me, I guess. This is more of an introspect. But no, it's I think it's something that we can always appreciate. I mean, I definitely appreciate such a Portuguese-speaking panel, for instance. I mean, that's a clear deliverable on my side already. Now, but jokes aside, of course, your work you do is important. From a consumer perspective, of course, it is always key to understand what the realities are on your side, but it's also very important to understand how we can engage on a constructive dialogue to understand how consumer needs can be addressed also on your side. Because, of course, from our perspective, that's the first line of defense for consumer welfare, which is we need to have good practices on the corporate level, and we need to have an openness from your organizations to receive not just consumer complaints, but also consumer input in order how practices should be improved. And most of the time, unfortunately, I have to say this is not the case. And I wish we didn't need a DSA, a DMA to come into place to sometimes have to force these mechanisms. But I think also it's a cultural...
This is why I asked the question, because if somebody's going to put a press release saying big tech needs to do better, it's going to be coming from your office pretty much in Brussels. And
not only.
Not only, but what I see here with code, for example, is the potential for that conversation of information exchange, sharing of ideas, engagement with particularly SMEs, which is, civil society and SMEs are always at the bottom of the food chain in Brussels, that they're being elevated to a position because it's necessary for the competitiveness of Europe to engage early. And like Letta said, if we don't engage the SMEs, we don't get the global scale up, and we're going to be sitting generation behind because we don't have all these other elements we've discussed. So, from the consumer point of view and the monitoring of the interaction of SMEs, consumers, and large tech, does it appear that this is something in the right direction?
I mean, I'll have to say, giving probably concrete examples is the best way of answering this. So Opera, the browser, is part of code. I have to say, one of the data that jumped out totally out of the screen for us is that in large part thanks to DMA obligations that introduce more contestability into the markets. What we see at consumers that were previously locked into services that probably they weren't really that interested anyway, but it was like, okay, I'll take it. Once being given the freedom to choose, the freedom to compare and to decide what is the best part for them to use, they, as we say, vote with their feet. And Opera was one of those that registered the highest jump of new users, choosing this particular browser, not less because of privacy reasons. So this is a concrete example of how contestability in the markets is important. And this is something I like to come back to what Carmelo said on the idea that we don't need economies of scale, we need economies of scope. Also connected with the telecom question. I think a lot of the problems we're facing today sometimes is a matter of perception precisely because we're still stuck in this mentality of somehow scale is the answer to everything. Well, digital has allowed us to turn this upside down and realize that this is not actually the case. You have SMEs that can jump into prominence precisely because they have a good product on a particular market that delivers a clear net gain for consumers. In telecom, it's the same thing. Some of the best operators out there are not for monopolist telecoms who need scale to grow. Some of the best challengers are actually offering cross-border services. One of them is going to be in Belgium very soon, I take it. I think Michel's in the room. Yeah, there you go. So thanks for that, also for your work on that role. That is going to introduce more contestability in the market, but this particular operator is also a very good example of how you don't need this super duper scale sometimes being sold to you to provide cross-border services, being appreciated and gain customers. Sometimes you just really need to focus on a particular scope, deliver a good service, and consumers will naturally vote with their feet. Just give them the chance.
Thank you. Anna, if you listen to Congress, the Senate, discussing the DMA, it surprises me that there are so many people who understand it well, which is not usually the impression we have of the US Congress, but they advocate for something similar. Like America has its own legal process, and some of these elements are already in the mix, but it's like the GDPR, held as a gold standard in many regards as well. Not universally, but do you see lessons to be learned for the United States in the same way that America seems to be listening to Europe at the same time?
Yes, I think we can, this legislation can inspire other countries to do that because, of course, we were big consumers of their products, so they need to adapt to our rule of law. So, but I think that I want to highlight one thing. I appreciate a lot this initiative of code. It means that the big techs, only 7, but the big stars tech, but it's a beginning, a good beginning that shows that the big techs are very committed also and with this path and with this way. So it's good to open opportunities to consumers because I think that this legislative pact, it's very focused on the big techs, of course. And I am a very positive person, so I believe that in the next mandate we will have a good appliance of this laws, because if we saw months ago the decision that we made with TikTok, for example, this means we need to have the will, the courage to apply these sanctions. So I think that we can inspire others to do and to regulate this this new reality. This is why we have institutions, democratic institutions, is to protect people from things. And technology can be an amazing thing, but can be a very destructive thing if it's not used in a very good way.
Carmelo, the research that you have seen in terms of the downside of not having an open ecosystem as well, what are the key lessons that policymakers, lawmakers need to understand about this?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, I mean, so when the farther you go down to close ecosystem, the more you go towards a single organization, right? And so everything being proprietary. Now, the downside of that is that you lose all of those spillover in terms of innovation for others. So when we speak about innovation, it needs to be clear in the context of ecosystem. I mean, academics that look at this, we tend to look at innovation by others, not the single firm that manages the ecosystem. So you don't have, again, right, I mean, those opportunities for SMEs, right, I mean, to build on share assets, to create, you know, their own products as they see value for that, right? So, but you have to fit into the strategic objective of the firm leading the closed ecosystem, and so you become much more like a supplier to, you know, to that objective function rather than, you know, an independent actor building your own value. You see less of inclusiveness, you know, so prices competition story. I mean, the prices remain very high, and there tends to be basically towards a few products. If any, actually, the prices can increase, with more closer ecosystems. Why? Because I mean, you have that piece of beautiful innovation that now is connected to other innovations that you have to buy that as a bundle if you want to have your product.
Just to follow up on price sensitivity, Claudio, in your view, how much of this market is price sensitive, and that's the main concern, and how much of this is a competition issue in terms of large players dominating the market and doing more long-term damage as a consequence of that? Where's the balance?
Well, I think price sensitivity is always an issue, and no matter how you look at it, if looking at it from a consumer perspective, price is a fundamental part of not just affordability, but accessibility. And what we do have, especially in terms of digital, is I think in Europe, although we have a significant issue of competition, prices have been on the rise, especially on the telecoms front. We've had this reality of reduced competition grow in our national markets. We have seen price rises that go beyond the current inflation, and sometimes paying more for less service, for less quality of service. So this is a problem. But I think fortunately, compared to other places on earth, to other markets, especially the US, I think fortunately we can still say that we do not have the issue of a digital divide by pricing. And as we keep hearing these calls for more consolidation and more deregulation of certain markets, especially telecom. Sorry, I'm going to hit that key for a long time. But this is an issue that for us rings true, which is the more we try to keep Europe competitive, I think we must start from putting our house in order first and realize we need internal competition first and foremost, and we should definitely not sacrifice it for external competitiveness, for competition with other markets. Because if we look at the US, for instance, some indicators might ring true, might look great, but bottom line, for consumers get a very, very nasty deal on that side. And that's the place where we don't want to go. We don't want to go into a reality where you need to drive your kids to the nearest, not passing advertising, burger shop just to get the free Wi-Fi so they connect and have school like we've seen in the pandemic. Fortunately, we didn't have that here, at least not in the scale we have over there. So pricing is an issue, but our absolute most priority is making sure Europe does not become a place where we have another digital divide by pricing.
Sometimes it's the dads going to the burger place during soccer practice so they can work there as well with the Wi-Fi. It's not just the kids. So we have a few minutes left. I want another couple of questions we'll put to the panel in just a moment. So if you want to put a question, please do it right now. Marisa, the ecosystem that we've talked about the interoperability. Let's talk a little bit about the policy framing as well. And you're working in EU affairs. What do you think needs to be explained to lawmakers about this? What messaging does code need to present? Are you going to talk about the competitiveness? Are you going to talk about completing a single market? Are you going to talk about creating a system of trust as well, which we didn't talk a lot about today? What are the messages that lawmakers need to hear that will probably stimulate them to do more, to listen more carefully?
So I think that all of what you've just mentioned, because I think that that's what we've been discussing throughout this debate. I would add more with, obviously, yes, where I stand in EU affairs, and that is when we are looking. So at the same time as we're saying, we want to do things better and differently, there is no point in dividing industry and consumers, because we will want to go hand in hand, because we want consumers to be happy with the services that we provide or that we enable in one way or another. So I think that the idea of code focusing on the idea of openness and interoperability and having a representative debate doesn't mean that you're never going to disagree with me. You're going to disagree many times, but there's going to be a foundation of understanding, and that is new. If we can keep that before the next framework comes on the table, the next draft on the Commission, we will probably have a much, richer conversation before that draft is on the table and not after. Because when it's after, then it becomes much more confrontational and much more transactional. The second point I would say now from the purely industry perspective is that what we've seen in the last 5 years, probably needed from where we were stand. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But we have seen laws that have departed with one objective and have gone, to serve complete different objectives. And when you do that in a regulatory process, then you come up with laws that are very difficult to understand. The second point would be, we have seen also laws that are very asymmetric. So we have embraced the idea of asymmetric regulation in Europe, which sometimes makes sense, but not always makes sense. So the response to higher competitiveness in Europe and the fact that we have a network of small and medium enterprises in Europe does not mean that all problems are solved by regulating exclusively big companies or foreign companies. And I think that there has to be a little bit more attention to that. The asymmetry needs to be well-founded first, because you cannot eliminate red tape of those companies that one day are here and then go to other parts of the world by simply putting rules on one side. The red tape needs to be eliminated also for the small and medium companies, so that once they get up their feet, they don't go and move somewhere else, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Brian, before you made a question, just let me underline what Carmen said, because this is the good thing about democracy.
There's one good thing.
Just the beautiful thing about democracy. You are allowed to disagree, okay? But you are supported by a common ground. And this is the magic of difference and the magic of reality. And the other thing is that asymmetry is good, because it gives you the power to grow and to develop yourself. Not only in, I don't want to be equal to everyone here. I just want to have the time and the space to be like I want to be, and to share my experience with the others. And this is the secret about European Union. And when you merge together some different cultures, and you need to have the space for everyone and not to impose your view. This is why I would like to applaud this initiative of Code to open these big tech companies and to open the dialogue and to diversity.
Thank you, Anna. A couple of quick fire questions, and then we're going to wrap up. There's one question, actually. Claudia, you can take this. How do you think to improve and increase the resources at the Commission to enforce the DMA? 10-second answer.
Well, synergy is a great place to start, and consumer organizations, and I leave that out there. We have members on the ground who are producing some stellar reporting and have some amazing surveys on how consumers are really suffering from some of the most misleading and unfair commercial practices on the ground, and we're always very happy to share. I think if we want an enforcement that can deliver the best results, the best way to do it is to maximize what you have and to tap into the resources that are already available. And from our side, the expertise is there, the resources are there, and this virtuous circle of cooperation and synergy should be created. So from our side, I think that's always an easy question to say, always happy to help.
Thank you. Now, we're going to wrap up. 30 seconds each, just your soundbite for takeaway today. Marissa, you want to go first?
Yes, as I started, I think this is a good day. We have, with the launch of this coalition, I hope that this new way of doing policy continues. We hope to be able to count and continue the dialogue, not only with the politicians, which we do, but also with the consumer organizations, which is absolutely fundamental. And we do hope that the EU, the next EU Commission and the Parliament do have a competitiveness vision based on openness.
Thank you. Carmelo, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so just want to remind the key concept. So let's think of open ecosystem as openness as a process enabling complementarities between interdependent firms, and structure that contains those complementarities. If we fix these two elements, then we can look at what are the inhibiting or enabling factors that impedes this or facilitate this.
Thank you. Anna.
So, you asked me 3 words, isn't it, before? So, and 3 wishes. So, to avoid the fear, we need transparency, we need trust. We need to trust. And for developing trust and trust relationships, we need cooperation, we need interoperability, we need accountability. We need to do in a fair way with fair rules. So we need competition, we need innovation, we need more choices, we need more users. So I'm very glad to be here today. So I hope that this is the beginning of everything. Thank you.
Good luck with your election campaign also. Claudio, last word.
Indeed, all this is important, indeed, transparency, trust, but as the old saying goes, trust but verify. And that's why good, important, clear legislation is important. This is why clear obligations are important, not as a burden from our perspective, but as a way of keeping a leveled playing field and keeping fair conditions for everyone. Regulation, competition, this is a good regulation, clear obligations for everyone, that everyone needs to abide by, is a competitive edge. It's something that makes Europe unique, it's something that gives European companies an advantage, it's something that empowers small companies to rise and create new opportunities for consumers, to find new ways of serving one another. This must be given a chance. And when consumers vote with their feet, the best way to create a good product that can actually disrupt the market is to listen to them, is to deliver what consumers actually want, and not to infer what they might actually be able to swallow. And so that's the most important thing. Listen to the consumer, listen to the people. They will let you know for sure always what is the best product and how they want it delivered. And if companies are willing to hear, they will find that competitive edge right there, where it should always be, the consumer. Thank you.
Thank you. So just before Coco comes back up to close us out and to invite you for lunch, so digital is the eggs in the cake. We have different definitions of ecosystems, and we need to work out more clearly what we're talking about with that. Code is really an opportunity to hear and to be heard, and to shape this conversation in the interest of not just the large companies but also the SMEs, and make sure there's good symmetry going on here. Your optimism astounds me. I congratulate you on that. Thank you for the goodwill that's needed to move forward in the political process as well during the next legislature. I think you represent very well. And finally, to focus on the consumer dynamics of this as well. The customer, at least the consumer, knows best on a grand scale. So let's pay attention to what's needed, what's wanted, and to facilitate that over the term. So thank you to our panel. It's a great discussion, a lot of detail today as well. Carmelo, Marissa, Anna, and Claudia, and also to Cristiano for earlier on as well. Thank you, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you. I could not end without thanking all the panelists, the speakers, the attendees online and in person for their active participation, their insightful views. As I was saying in the beginning, it has given us lots of food for thought. It's only the beginning. I want to emphasize there was a lot of focus on SMEs, consumer dialogue. Code is a mixture of big and small companies, European, non-European. You can find information on your seats. There is a QR code, but for information, our members are FlyWallet, Google, Honor, Lynx, Meta, Motorola, Lenovo, Nothing, Qualcomm, and Wire, Opera and Wire. Opera was already mentioned by Claudio. Thanks for that. This is only the beginning. We aim to continue the discussion. We think it's the right thing to do. It's the right moment. We are going to host a series of events like this one, not necessarily in Brussels, but beyond. And your thoughts today has given us lots of feedback to continue drafting the manifesto, which we're currently doing, and we would look forward to publishing in the next few days. So thanks very much for that. Thank you again on behalf of Code for coming. I invite you to a light lunch that is served outside. Have a great day. Thank you again.
Thanks.